Welcome to the next instalment of our Platform Insight interview series. I'm Nicola Hayes, Chief Marketing Officer at Platform Markets Group. And today I am joined by Richard Ludwig and Mark Chester, two of my favourite people in the industry who are going to be talking to us about data centre winners and losers. So first of all, if you could just both introduce yourselves and a little bit of background as to how you ended up in our wonderful, weird universe of data centres and digital infrastructure. We'll start with Richard.
So it's a good question. So I've been doing investment banking for many years now. I started doing technology investment banking and about 10, 15 years ago, software was very exciting and everyone wanted to do it. Data centers were very different to what they are today, and they were less interesting. And I think I got pushed into that sector because it wasn't as popular as software and tech, to be honest. But I stuck at it, and now everyone wants to do it. Now everyone's fighting to do data center deals because of the scale of them, the AI, they're in the press all over. So now I'm in the hottest part of the market, so probably got there by default rather than choice. But I was lucky, shall we say.
That's pretty much the norm. What about you, Mark?
Definitely by default. Only a little longer ago, so late 1990s, a similar thing where a job landed on a tele-hotel project. That's how long ago this was. And it didn't sort of neatly fit into any other bit of the business. So I landed on my desk and really haven't looked back. And I guess particularly in those days, in the early 2000s, there weren't that many people within the DC sector. And some of the early conferences that we went to way back when, you could have probably shuttered them in a room a couple of times the size of this one. But just it's grown and grown and grown since then. I guess it's really only over the last 10 years that it is motored like we are seeing now. And it's
exactly growing. It's great to have, I think anyone of our generation in particular, and coming up, maybe, like you say, within the last 10 years, happy accident. And I said, you actually say to people now what you were on in, and they actually understand what you're doing, though unfortunately most of them have read the articles and very irresponsible journalism. But that's my private bugbear this week. But I'm not going to go on to that because we'll be here all day. What we're here to talk about is data centre winners and losers. Now, over the course of, since the late 1990s, myself and Mark, and obviously Richard, 10 years in the industry now?
A bit more than that,
It's been a roller coaster with the money going in, with the interest in it, with investors who don't necessarily really understand what we're doing. And so in terms of trying to work out where the next big deal is or who is going to win in terms of pre-existing deals and pre-existing investments, it's always been a bit of a crystal ball gazing. But I think now, in the time we're in, with technology taking over at such fast pace, it's even more difficult. So if you could give us an overview of the last 12 months and what you think are the main changes that people need to be on the lookout for or aware of when it comes to working out whether a deal is going to be successful or not.
Should I take it first? Yeah, so I can answer this one. So I think it's interesting because there have definitely been changes over the last 12, 18 months. I think in terms of investing in good businesses, good platforms, there's always going to be a need for enterprise level, we call it co-location, where your servers are outsourced in someone else's data center and they provide you with the infrastructure and the cooling to run your servers. I think that's always going to be there. So, and actually interest in that sort of asset has increased because a lot of businesses that started there have moved towards hyperscale, which are much larger facilities, chunkier checks, and there have been a lot of eyeballs on the hyperscale platforms, which has increased their price. So I do a lot of work in the mid-market, for mid-market funds, when they're looking at the hyperscale sort of assets, the ticket sizes are too big now and the valuations are very high. So actually they've started to move back to original enterprise co-location. And those assets, as I said, multi-tenanted, lots of businesses all in the same, under the same roof. You have nice recurring contracts, low churn because the customers are all connected together, so it's quite hard for them to move out. So you have a stable contract base that you can back. And if there's some additional land or power on site, you've also got a growth strategy. So that old school type of smaller data center with regional enterprise co-location has come back in vogue with investors. And we think we're going to see more of that as workloads move more to the edge. So that's one successful sort of business model. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you've got growing demand for AI sort of workloads, and not just hyperscalers, but also a new category of what we call neocloud that are accessing chips and video chips, acquiring them, and then selling the usage of those GPUs to their customers. And that's a different type of data center deployment, different type of data center demand, much more power dense. So you need different cooling technology, and there's a lot of investment going into those sorts of businesses right now. I think working out what is going to be a successful platform on that side is a bit harder because a lot of these are startups, so they don't have a defined, well-established customer base like you do on the enterprise co-location. So there are a lot of businesses that have scaled very quickly. They don't have the same balance sheets or investor types as the more as the ones that have been around for a longer period of time. So I'm going to pass on to Mark in a minute, but I think so we've got probably three models actually. You've got enterprise colo, you've got traditional hyperscale cloud for public cloud, and then you've got a new AI sort of asset category emerging. And they're all at different scales of the investment journey. And then it just depends on what your risk appetite is, and also your size of equity that you can commit.
Yeah, no, those are really interesting points. Right, just quickly, I'm going to ask Mark to very quickly tell us what neoclouds are for those of you who haven't got a clue. Explain a neocloud, Mark.
So a neocloud is it's a tech business that is providing as part of its offering the use of GPU servers. So think of, in the old days, we used to talk about SaaS as a business model within the data center sector, the actual, not only the infrastructure, the data center infrastructure that sits behind that particular offering, but the IT, the servers within it.
It's a natural progression, really.
Well, yeah, in many respects, it's just a rehash of something that we've been doing previously. We just now give it a new label, like a lot of things within this sector. It's just the compute capacity of the thing that is being offered to end users is far greater than we've seen with previous models within that sector. And in fact, we talked earlier about winners and losers within this sector, but one of the sort of front and center winners has clearly been businesses like NVIDIA as the manufacturer of these chipsets. I think they've now got a market cap of 4 trillion, something insane.
It's monopoly money levels.
Off the back of selling these chipsets that are underpinning this sort of massive growth in AI data center usage. And so to Richard's point, there are a cluster of new businesses, new names that you'll have seen enter this market. But in many respects, there's a bit of history repeating itself here. Because if you think back sort of 15, 20 years ago, where we had difficulty getting money into the data center sector, in those days, perhaps because more perception around the risk associated with running data centers. And obviously, as time has gone by, we've seen actually it's not, this is not as risky an asset class as perhaps the perception was about that. We're now, in many respects, with some of the neocloud operators, sort of back in that that sort of more cash and debt constrained space that we used to be with new data center businesses 15 years ago. In this case, some of the technology is so new that folks are struggling to catch up, and we'll have seen. You're bound to have heard over the summer around, the rate of pace of change in relation to some of the chip technology that is coming out now is requiring, changes from one type of environmental infrastructure to another, so to liquid cooling, and now another. And so, how do you plan to fund a project like that when you're not actually sure what the technical solution is that's needed within the particular? So being nimble and being able to change design, but also then having funders sitting behind you that can respond to that is quite challenging. And so I think those are some of the challenges that neocloud operators are having, and particularly sensitive for them because they're new businesses. And so there is that level of caution that we, in the same way as we saw sort of 15, 20 years ago with the new data center platforms. So,
and as well as the neocloud piece, what's your key takeaways from the last 12 months about how the market is changing? I mean, we were having this conversation earlier about the fact that, even just over the summer period, just over a period of a few months, things are changing so rapidly. What's your insight from 2024 till now?
Yeah, I mean, the last 12 months in particular has been from the AI stroke cloud end it's been dominated with high density deals and a lot of new stuff coming our way in terms of the infrastructure that is being developed within data centers, and clearly that has a whole bunch of knock-on effects in terms of permitting, in terms of getting how much cash, in short, is needed to deliver on these projects. But also then how does that feed through into the pricing on deals with end users on a design that may not, at the point that you're trying to strike a deal, have been properly evolved. So to me, it's felt very start-stop over the last 12 months. I mean, you will have all seen in the press around, changing demand signals coming from the hyperscaler. I think, there's an element of hyperscalers perhaps not knowing how much capacity they're going to need from third-party operated data center providers. But there's also layered on top of that, and in a way this makes it seem even more, probably makes it seem more uncertain than it really is. There is just a lot of learning going on, both on the developer operator side and on the end user side, in terms of what is it that we actually need in terms of the infrastructure and these and that scares people. That scares new entrants to the market.
Definitely.
They're really keen to invest, but it's like, how do we know that this is actually what is needed here?
I've definitely seen in the last 12 months more flexibility in design because of that. So you're having data centers built that can cope with higher density racks in the future. So maybe they're not installed with liquid cooling straight away. They have the ability to flex and bring in rear door heat exchangers or liquid cooling in the next iteration. Some of the older data centers might not be able to, have the right floor load bearing or, the right height, or the exterior of the data center may not be able to accommodate some of the external infrastructure needed. Now, new data centers, even the enterprise ones, are catering for that to be able to be future-proofed. We're seeing more modular builds as well, and if not the whole data center being built in modules, certain parts of the data center being built in modules, so it's future-proof for exactly that point.
I'm in a way, to touch on the losers that we were talking about earlier, I've got a little bit of concern around, particularly if you think about all those legacy leasehold centres that are in a particular area in West London, where actually the ability to flex, to deploy different types of infrastructure in those, because you've got a landlord that you've got to deal with. Now, fortunately, we're talking about a sophisticated landlord in that case. So there is the ability to have him dealing with a landlord that understands the asset class, because obviously they're in it themselves now. But look at the floor loading demands that we've seen on some of the liquid cooling projects that we've been dealing with over the last 12 months. Those buildings simply aren't fit for purpose to deploy.
No.
So I think you are going to see in those sort of legacy assets a lot more hybrid solutions being deployed. So you are going to see...
Can I jump in and just ask a question there then? Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of... calling some of the facilities we're talking about legacy makes me chuckle, because they were talking about the legacy before them for many, many years. Do you think we're going to end up with a huge load of legacy buildings that obviously need adjustments from the construction perspective, from the upgrades? Do you think they're going to be able to get the funding to do it?
Well, yeah, but for also, to your point at the start, there are distinct markets here. This isn't one big amorphous blob of a market. There is still healthy demand for air-cooled cloud service type deployments.
I think we've forgotten about the enterprise recently. If you think back to 10 years ago, it was all about enterprise. It was the finance people, the banks. Are they in your building? Can we get the retail people in? And it went, stop by stop.
Inevitably, it's the thing that makes the most noise because it's got the most zeros on the end of it.
But we've forgotten about.
That makes the headlines.
Yeah.
I mean, you only saw this week about that the project in Texas and the number of zeros.
Yeah.
It grabs the headlines.
Yeah.
It's not as newsworthy to hear about a retrofit on a 25 megawatt data center in West London.
But if you look at conferences and conference programs or content that comes out or news that comes out, you hear very, very little about enterprise demand, which if you look back 10 years ago, it was all about that enterprise demand. The minute AI hit the head, hyperscale first probably, the minute we had hyperscale and then AI, I think the market's forgotten that there is a huge market underneath there that is still ticking along.
There's a quite grateful spotlight being offset. I mean, we work with clients here who are very quietly hoovering up nice portfolios of what we would call legacy data centers, and yet in most cases they are, sub 7-8 years old, and they're achieving great returns on those with a very stable client base. They're reliable facilities, and they are pulling together portfolios of those and therefore driving efficiencies through their business by the scale of the portfolios they're smushing together.
Do you think... sorry, Richard.
I was just going to answer a couple of questions you raised. The first one you said, will all these legacy data centers get funding? I think not all data centers are the same, even if they're enterprise. The way the infrastructure and the building is built may not be conducive to a future-proof data center. So I fully expect some legacy data centers will either be demolished or be used for different purposes in the future. They won't all get funding. I think what is important is the power connection. And if you've still got the power connection and it's in a good location, then there's a good chance of getting funding. So that's the first point. I think on the focus away from enterprise and more towards AI, I think there's probably going to be a bridge where the two convene. At the moment, a lot of the attention has been on the large language learning, but it will go to inference where the user wants to access an application, an AI application, and the theory is that those servers will need to be placed closer to the end user, closer to the edge, and businesses will want to access that. So it won't be in the middle of the Nordics in a large language learning center. It will be a more functional, traditional sort of sized data center. And I think that's what will bridge the AI gap between what we're seeing now and the enterprise market. So I fully expect that the future sort of enterprise, or let's call them co-location data centers, will have a mix of traditional cloud, public and private, and more AI, high-dense inference workloads. So it'll be a coming together of the two.
So actually, ironically, that these buildings do end up becoming recycled, but to meet that inferencing demand. And maybe that's what we've talked about edge for years.
Oh, you mean distributed computing as it used to be known as?
This is the catalyst.
It would be great if it was, because I've said for a long time there needs to be different tiers. 1 minute it's everyone needs to put everything in a massive great facility in Norway because of the cooling. Next minute everything needs to be close to the end user because everyone wants to watch films on Netflix. And the reality is a mix depending on your business model and your own internal requirements on all of those. Do you think investors truly understand that, though? As a sweeping generalisation.
I think investors are far more sophisticated about this sector now. Events by those that you're involved with, but also that there is a much greater critical mass to the data center sector now than there was 15 years ago, and that there are an awful lot more people active within the sector, and therefore the level of intelligence within, not only within the investors, but within the banks is much better now than it was Even last few minutes.
Yeah, a few minutes.
Few minutes.
It's changing like that. That's how quick the industry we work in is. Entrepreneurs. So it used to be that anyone, and you'll have had these conversations, I've been called in on numerous occasions, we've got a piece of land, or we've got a shed, we're going to turn it into a data centre, right? And 8 times out of 10, you'd suddenly hear that they have actually managed to find financing somehow or other. Everything I've been seeing recently seems to be that is becoming rarer and rarer, and unless there is a guaranteed tenant, guaranteed power, that those sorts of deals just aren't there anymore. What's your opinion on that?
There's definitely a, active market of developers with terrific skills and experience around power procurement who are assembling opportunities, which they've no intention of developing themselves, but which obviously the objective will be, once planning has been obtained, permitting, jurisdiction, to flip on to data center developer operators or to hyperscalers or put them over. And actually, this summit's been a really good example with the, I want to go a bit techy here, but with the Gate 2 process and the NISO compliance on projects for which the window is now just literally within the last few days has closed, where we have been stapling power connection offers to sites where we feel that there's a realistic prospect of bringing forward data center development. I think what's been interesting with those projects is that I haven't seen developer operators or hyperscalers behind many of them at all.
No,
I can
not many have materialised, have they yet?
Count on one hand ones that we've been involved with for the kind of household name developer operators. We've been doing all of this work with businesses that most folks within this sector won't know of, and yet these are very capable people. They know exactly what they're doing. They've been within this sector in one way or another for a considerable period of time. So yes, we do get lots of calls still around. I've got a lovely bit of land, but actually the calls are with people who are far more. But it's a bit like the point you were making earlier around the quality of the people that we deal with within the finance. There's just a much better level of understanding.
Makes a huge difference.
Just a twist I'd add to that is I think a lot of it depends on location as well. So if you've got a power connection and also the timing of the connection. So if you have a pre-2030 power connection in Slough or the Docklands, for example, then I don't think you're going to struggle to sell that. If you have 20 megawatts of unbuilt a connection in, say, Birmingham, that's going to be less desirable. Will you be able to get financing? Maybe. There are lots of ifs and buts, but location is important in the data center space, and timing of power on date is the other important factor.
Okay, one thing that concerns me about these sort of sites which are not in those usual clusters, and there's been an awful lot of them, particularly since the announcements in January around AI vote zones in the UK and the equivalent emphasis across the rest of continental Europe. There is no way the number of projects that have crossed our desk that are in that 100+ category are going to all be delivered. There is no way that, maybe in our lifetime anyway, that I can see there being that level of demand for AI campuses of this number across Europe. It's quite staggering, the amount of opportunity there. And there's going to be winners and losers within that, where those locations are.
But that's a really interesting point. So obviously there's two different, you've got governments across Europe and globally who go, right, AI, come on, let's support, let's do all of this. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got evil data centres, power usage, water usage, and not a lot of joined up thinking between the two, if I'm honest.
As a sector, we've been
useless. We've got a serious PR problem, but that's a problem for another day and another conversation. But do you think that What is the impact of government supporting things like AI growth, AI campuses? What impact does that have on sentiment from across the investor spectrum? Does it have any impact at all? And conversely, the other side of it, the public opinion, like the people in Spain that were all protesting, not against tourists once actually, against data centre developments, does that put investors off?
Yes, I mean, look, we've had issues with that kind of sentiment for as long as I remember being involved in a project in North Paris, and this has got to be like 20 years ago. It was an action group. Urban Axial were protesting again. Indeed, I think they shut down projects on this particular development project on the north side of Paris. We've seen problems like this more contemporaneously in municipalities around the Milan area, where and indeed political change at a mayoral level actually impacting projects moving forward. If we again back to the sort of winners and losers theme, if you look at the kind of losers in terms of markets across Europe at the moment, look how stymied the Dutch data center market has been because of those regulatory constraints, the market perception of data centers. I think there's been sort of zero net growth in the Dutch market over the last. I mean, their vacancy rates are probably at bottom low now, but I can't see new capacity being added to that market at the moment. So, there's three different things going on here. You've got the sort of messages from government around streamlining planning process and AI growth zones being a catalyst for for regeneration. I question that. And then we have public perception. It's, the lights are going to go off, and I have water coming out my tap. That in many respects, for data center sectors, the fault, because we've just not messaged properly. People don't properly understand the sector. I don't see either of those two things though really tempering the equity and debt world's appetite for this sector, because back to my point I was making earlier, I think the regular players within this market are far more sophisticated.
What do you think?
I think so. Yeah, I appreciate point. Amsterdam and Dublin similar.
Dublin,
and it looks like Frankfurt's sort of heading that way. So
the biggest growth. I mean, in Europe, they've been absolute winner this year. I think they've had the fastest level of take up and new product.
But the public perception, especially around Frankfurt, is not very supportive. But the UK data centers are now designated critical national infrastructure, and it's not going to change public opinion overnight, but it does help reposition the sector and help people think about it in a different way. It's on par with the blue lights now, which is crazy. So I don't think it's going to change public perception overnight. I do think the government supporting will help drive investment to the country. As you say, making planning more easily available, helping to speed up connectivity and building infrastructure required to deliver the power. I think we've still got a way to go on the public perception point.
But it's not enough to be able to, put off serious players from. They're not going to make them run away from deals that are already there on the table.
Without being too specific, the article that you were alluding to earlier, that was from either early this week or late last week, got approached a few times to comment on that. Actually, I didn't see there being much mileage in commenting on that particular article because it was so sort of clearly skin deep in terms of it of the sector. And yes, that will get a little bit of traction with people who don't want to like data centers. I'm sure they will vent through their social media accounts, ironically. But that doesn't detract from the fact that we need to do a better PR job.
Yeah, absolutely.
The developments that I see, most developers are very much focused on ESG, reducing PUE, being sustainable, heat offtake and reuse. So internally as a sector, I think we are focusing on it. It's just the press externally that,
Yeah, and back to the theme, winners and losers. I guess another winner for the last 12 months has been sustainability from an energy perspective, because I read that actually now 94% of third-party operated data centers across Europe are powered using entirely green sources. And it's
That's extraordinary if you look back in history.
And so that doesn't obviously fit with maybe the public perception, but actually I think, as you say, the operators and the end users of the data centers are very fixated on this, even though the perception might not be that that's the case.
Yeah, it's a PR problem. That's something that we need to address as an industry. Some closing comments, because I've taken up enough of both of your time so far, but I could carry on quite happily for another hour actually listening to both of you. So we've talked about the last 12 months, what's going next 12 to 18 months. Again, I know what are going to be the key points for winning in your data center investments, and what are the key things to watch out for so that you don't end up becoming a loser?
Let's take that one first, Mark.
You could.
Do you want to take it first? Yeah.
Okay, I'll do the negative one first. Loser. I think Europe is in danger of losing. And I know that sounds a sort of very broad statement.
Just in data centers or generally, politically?
No, I mean within the data center sector. It worries me that, look, you look at the number of data center developer operators who historically have operated globally, but who are staying shy of Europe at the moment because it's just perceived as being too difficult. So difficult from a energy procurement perspective, perceived as being increasingly difficult from a regulatory planning perspective. Layered on top of that, you've got European Union increasingly leaning into controls over AI in a way that you're not seeing in the US. You've got construction cost inflation, which is still running much hotter here in Europe than in the US. But also then coupled with that, the scale of projects. So if you're money looking for a home and you're equally happy either side of the Atlantic, why would you, if you have an opportunity in the US, there's an opportunity in Europe. Why would you choose to come to Europe? So that concerns me. So that we could, if we're not careful, end up sort of losing particularly this AI arms race and being the infrastructure to support that. We could end up coming second. I'll leave you to say something.
Yeah, I mean, on the losers as well, I'd say more so even in the UK, where we've got, relative to, we talked about the Nordics, but other locations as well, power is relatively expensive. So from an AI training perspective, it's not that attractive investment. But then also our grid infrastructure, both generation and transmission, needs upgrading. So I think, from a training perspective, and that's why we have these AI growth zone designations coming, we run the risk of falling behind in the UK as a broader Europe. If you have a look at what France are doing and other geographies, I think we're falling potentially behind.
We definitely need government leaning in far more to helping to solve the energy infrastructure issue.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure I'm seeing that happen at the moment.
So on to winners. Come on, what's the positive? Where are the winners?
I think the people that will win are those that have, time to market is the most important thing right now. If you have available capacity, if you have available capacity in the right design, in the right location, and you have control over your supply chain, you're going to win.
Completely agree. Near dated power. Anything that's got a date in the late 20s is definitely going to put you at a competitive advantage.
You've got to choose something else, Mark. You can't...
Could it, it could be the prettiest colour building?
No, unfortunately, that I'm going to cut it and when it sits up.
Yes. Yeah, I think we all thought about the same one straight away then. Yeah. I can't get that image out of my head now. Richard Ludwig from Alantra and Mark Chester from Eversheds, huge thanks for sharing your insights with us today. That's been amazing, and I'm looking forward to seeing you both on team in a few weeks. With the CapEx infrastructure spend on digital infrastructure expected to reach the trillions by the end of this decade. There's obviously a lot of deals to be made out there, but it just needs a little bit of research and knowledge in order to make sure that you're one of the winners, not the losers. So thank you both, and I'll see you in a few weeks in the beautiful French Riviera.
Thank you very much. Thanks so much for having me.